Good evening, friends. Stephen Benoon here with Israeli News Live, and I have finally been able to make contact to get some answers on President Trump and is he leaving office? Will he stay? Is there something going to happen? Something going to change? Many of you know that I had actually shared with you through different intel sources that I have that he will actually be reelected for a second term. And now Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have been elected, and many would say based on what the media is, and that there is an avalanche of fraud that has taken this and robbed it away from President Donald Trump. And really caught me off guard as well, like many of you. And I have to also say, too, which we had shared with you, that there was a 10% chance from one of our closest intel sources on this that Biden could actually win. But it would be through nefarious means. So I've been really trying to dig deep and find out what's really going on. And I know one of my intel sources, and I'm not going to say who's who or what's what in this case tonight, but one of the intel sources I had already contacted me, letting me know that even though it looks like Trump will not be in, he will still be president of the United States. It would be overturned. Don't know exactly how or why or anything like that, but it would happen. But I also had another source that I knew would have much more meaningful information if that was plausible. So I've been trying to work this, going through different contacts that I have to see what's going on, because clearly the president has not, he's not conceded the election. He's not conceded over to Biden. And so it is really causing a lot of agitation on both sides of the playing field there. You have the Democrats and the Republicans really starting to get at each other. And we're seeing some very serious things unfold. Now I shared with you guys as well before that the intel people normally know who's going to be president sometimes years in advance. And I wanted to play this 1988 Oprah Winfrey show where Donald Trump was on back in 1988 and actually mentions the presidential aspirations. Kind of interesting that Oprah actually brings this up, but let's listen to just about 30 seconds or so of this clip here.
Major U.S. newspapers last year criticizing U.S. foreign policy. What would you do differently, Donald?
I'd make our allies, forgetting about the enemies you can't talk to so easily, I'd make our allies pay their fair share. We're a debtor nation. Something's going to happen over the next number of years with this country, because you can't keep going on losing $200 billion, and yet we let Japan come in and dump everything right into our markets and everything. It's not free trade. If you ever go to Japan right now and try to sell something, forget about it, Oprah. Just forget about it. It's almost impossible. They don't have laws against it. They just make it impossible. They come over here, they sell their cars, their VCRs, they knock the hell out of our companies. And, hey, I have tremendous respect for the Japanese people. I mean, you can respect somebody that's beating the hell out of you, but they are beating the hell out of this country. Kuwait, they live like kings. The poorest person in Kuwait, they live like kings. And yet they're not paying. We make it possible for them to sell their oil. Why aren't they paying us 25% of what they're making? It's a joke.
This sounds like political presidential talk to me, and I know people have talked to you about whether or not you want to run. Would you ever?
Probably not, but I do get tired of seeing the country ripped off.
Why would you not?
I just don't think I really have the inclination to do it. I love what I'm doing. I really like it.
Also, it doesn't pay as well.
No, it doesn't. But, I just probably wouldn't do it, Oprah. I probably wouldn't, but I do get tired of seeing what's happening with this country. And if it got so bad, I would never want to rule it out totally, because I really am tired of seeing what's happening with this country, how we're really making other people live like kings, and we're not.
What do you think?
Just kind of stop right there. I just wanted to bring that up because in conversations that I've had, I was told that as early as 1990, Donald Trump it had already been determined that he would be the president of the United States, and even knowing that 2016 would be the year that he would run. He would actually run, and he would be reelected 2 terms. And as crazy as this might sound, even the part that he would go through a tremendous turmoil getting reelected, that it would be so close that he would even lose to Joe Biden. They knew that Joe Biden would be the one that he would run against in 2020 and that Kamala Harris would actually be his running mate. Now, as far as knowing that part, that was right around the year 2000 as far as Biden, but as early as 1990, it was already being spoken that Trump would actually be president. That really kind of blew me away. I mean, I've heard a lot of things before, but so I wanted to know is what's going to happen, because it seems almost impossible at this point for Donald Trump to be able to overturn anything. All the lawsuits that have been filed, they have been losing left and right. Even after the famed Giuliani speaks up at this press briefing, and the lawyers there were speaking on behalf of the President of the United States, that they have the overwhelming evidence. It still seems that the media, the left, everyone is doing everything they can to keep Trump from being able to overturn this. Like I said, logistically, it almost seems impossible that it could be done, even if we say that there is widespread voter fraud, which everyone is denying that there is widespread voter fraud. I was told, though, that Biden and Kamala would be a backup plan. There's always backup plans in case something doesn't go right, something causes an election to falter. But then the source that I have, the secondary source, had done some asking around, because even he believed that we were in a situation to where Trump was going to lose, and the backup plan with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris would actually be in full fruition. But he was assured that no, this is going to be overturned, that Trump still had more work to do. Of course, I had expressed my discontent as far as with President Trump and his supporting of those 7 laws. I won't say what they are, that certain organizations have been pushing and that he has been supportive of, and as it has been reported in the press over in the little country south of Lebanon, said that he is the biggest supporter of. I also expressed my dissatisfaction as well of the warp speed operation, and that I consider that an aggressive move against the American people. Other than that, it's not as much of an issue, but I was also assured that we would probably have 4 more years of relatively calm before the president that will take place in 2024, which I was told would be a black woman. And it's not, as far as I know, it's not Kamala Harris. I can't get an answer on who it is, but that this would be what would happen, kind of making amends for what's going to happen when this is overturned. Which my concern was that, as many of you no doubt would have, this is going to cause such repercussions in this country, no doubt rioting and everything else. How bad it will get, who knows? But that may also be part of the plan. Maybe they wanted to do this, because as I shared with you guys before, when Obama was president, one of his Secret Service agents told me then how that they were working to try to create a scenario in this nation that would cause races to come against each other for the purpose of disarmament. And I've also been told that even since Trump has been president, that there would be an effort to do targeted disarmament, basically blaming it on the people. And there's no better way to blame it on the people than to cause a mass riot across the nation over an election, with the patriots also fighting, and then of course you would have Antifa, Black Lives Matter, all these here that feel that they have been disenfranchised would take to the streets, and then we would have total chaos and pandemonium, which also sets up the stage for the military to force the warp speed operation upon the public. I was assured, though, too, when it comes to that, politicians do not believe that it should be forced on the public as far as having to take the vaccine. But the military has a different mindset altogether. So if we do end up in a situation where the military has to get involved with rioting that's going on across the nation as a result of Trump getting into office, I can see how that would also play right into the desire to bring about warp speed in a forcible fashion. So keep that in mind. Here it is. Giuliani speaking. I'll just play a few clips, a few seconds here for you to listen to as well. This is where he comes in the defense of the President of the United States, that they have the overwhelming amount of evidence. Let's listen to this. The video tonight, friends, is going to be quite lengthy, because we're also going to be discussing this issue of Trump being placed back in office, and this will be overturned, as I've been assured. Again, I can't say that for myself. I can only say what's been shared with me. Time will tell. Needless to say, time will tell. But we're going to also talk about China and the arming of the cartels south of our border and the threat of the invasion by China, and also certain politicians that have deep ties to China as well. Going to get into this in just a minute. Let's listen to this with Rudy Giuliani and the other attorneys that are defending the president's his defense team for the election.
Very quickly is there's not a singular voter fraud in one state. This pattern repeats itself in a number of states. Almost exactly the same pattern, which to any experienced investigator, prosecutor, would suggest that there was a plan from a centralized place to execute these various acts of voter fraud, specifically focused on big cities, and specifically focused on, as you would imagine, big cities controlled by Democrats, and particularly focused on big cities that have a long history of corruption. The number of voter fraud cases in Philadelphia could fill a library.
We'll kind of stop there, because many of you, I know, have already watched this. Many of you have sent this type video to me as well, which I actually watched it live when it came out that night, because I knew it was going to be going on. But the thing is then I get this tweet here. This was Kitty Shackelford. It was shared with me, and I forget actually who shared this with me in my message box there, but they sent this to me. Team Trump lawyer Jordan Sikolo said on Newsmax today that lawsuits set to be filed in Georgia this week are going to be explosive. And I want to play this clip here for you, at least part of this clip, because in this particular clip, this guy that's being interviewed, Jordan Sikolo, says that nothing even Giuliani has said has been brought up about this information here. Let's play a clip of this so you see where we're going.
Jordan Sekulow is a Trump legal advisor and the executive director of the American Center for Law and Justice. He joins us now to talk about where the president stands as states start certifying their results. Jordan, thank you for making time for us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
You were on our air earlier this week, and you said that it was a put up or shut up week for the campaign. What progress do you believe was made by the campaign, and have they picked up any momentum?
So we have got lawsuits likely to be filed in Georgia on either Monday or Tuesday. I can't get into the details, but let me just say I heard on another network the lieutenant governor of Georgia, who's a Republican, saying he just didn't understand what President Trump was tweeting about what's coming in Georgia. And I can't tell you right now, but what's coming in Georgia will be shocking when we file this in federal court Monday or Tuesday. It's nothing that we have talked about before. It's not related to what you heard in the press conference either. This is something completely separate. So I will tell you that we've got new litigation coming in the state of Georgia. Also, likely new litigation later on because of dates and requirements in Wisconsin, and still looking at litigation in Clark County specifically because of the 160,000 votes that were tossed there for a local race. But yet, and they actually said, Clark County, the Democrat county commission said, "Oh, it's tossed because there was too much fraud in those 160,000 votes." Yet they're still using those votes to count towards the presidential election.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll kind of pause there. Again, these are just some of the things that are coming out in the defense of the president and him actually allegedly winning this election and Joe Biden losing it. But this all gets much, much deeper than what you could imagine. Of course, exclusive interview with Rudy Giuliani got cut off after he talks about offing the heads of people. But he says here, the Clinton reference echoed the core claims from Trump's campaign earlier Path to Victory press conference, where Mr. Giuliani spun a web of connections in his theory of a national conspiracy behind communist plot backed by Venezuela Hugo Chavez in concert with Cuba, China, tied to Democratic leadership through the Clinton Foundation and George Soros. Notice that right there, tied to the Clinton Foundation and George Soros. This is why I say I'm going a little deeper into this tonight, and I'm not here inciting with President Trump or against him. I'm not here, of course, with Biden or Kamala Harris. I am looking at this objectively because as I was in this meeting yesterday, trying to get some more details, we went into also the issue of China arming the cartels south of our border. I know there's been many people talking about the Chinese being on the south, also Chinese military up in Canada. I also had that confirmed with a friend of mine that has deep connections in the Pentagon that said that yes, they were even moving troops to the southern border. Very concerned about an invasion of the United States in the near future through our southern border, and also that I was able to confirm that information with other sources as well, very very high up, that not only has China been doing that, but China has been very busy for a number of years. And of course, we did a little video the other day sharing with you the connections that China has with different countries, even down with Morales down in South America, and the Mexican cartel, or not the cartels, but the Mexican government giving them $600 million, in funding and stuff. But like I said, it goes much deeper. We've seen even with people on Twitter and other places, YouTube, that are talking about the Chinese troops on our southern border. And then, of course, through one of my intel sources there, they had shared with me that yes, indeed, they were, and they were arming the cartels as part of that initiative to come into this country. A secondary source through the Pentagon had shared with me as well that the march that was coming up through Mexico, that it came up from a country down near Nicaragua when they were doing that to march to our borders there, was actually a cover operation for China to see if they could actually get us, how they would be able to mobilize troops coming up to our southern border. So anyway, again, that information got confirmed as well, that yes, that is true, but it was a much deeper situation that was going on. So this is why we're going to take this, and the election, believe it or not, actually plays a lot into this, and that's why I wanted to share some of these things with you. So the Clinton reference echoed the core claim, this is what Giuliani was talking about, that Trump campaign's earlier Path to Victory press conference, where Mr. Giuliani spun a web of connections in his theory of national conspiracy behind communist plot backed by Venezuela Hugo Chavez in concert with Cuba, China, tied to Democratic leadership through the Clinton Foundation and George Soros. Mr. Giuliani suggests to give them all. The chop gave even Mr. Hannity a moment's pause as he ignored the comments and changed the subject before either he or someone in the studio's control room gave the interview the chop. All right, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I'm not trying to cut you off. Are you there? Oh, we've lost him. All right, Mr. Hannity said before moving on to the next segment. So yeah, they cut him off because they don't want the people to know. He mentions Clinton Foundation and George Soros. Well, there is a lot to be said about these things here. Let's move here.
Former President George W. Bush.
And I don't know if it stayed. Let's see. Yeah. If you go back, and I've got to build a little bit of a case here for you to really understand what we're going to get into here. Former President Bush and Mitt Romney, back in June 7th of 2020, this article had came out on The Hill where they would not be in support of President Trump's reelection. And these are Republicans, no less. Of course, I highlighted on here, former President George W. Bush and Senator Mitt Romney will not support President Trump's reelection, the New York Times reported Saturday. Several Republican leaders are struggling with whether to endorse the sitting president in his reelection campaign, with some considering endorsing or voting for presumptive Democratic nominee Joe Biden. So why would Republican leaders cross the aisles like that? What would be the purpose behind this? Because it almost seems unbelievable that they would do something like that. And even, now this is a little different here, Kamala Harris in many ways, Trump is a national security threat. So you've got Democrats, in this case here, the vice presidential nominee, Kamala Harris, allegedly right now, is saying that Trump is a national security threat. And we've got two prominent Republicans, a former president, as well as a Mitt Romney who ran against Bush and lost. You'd think he'd have some contentious issues with Bush. Both not willing to support their own Republican Party as a presidential candidate. And then, nothing I mean, of course, it wasn't something we would not expect out of the Clintons or out of Jimmy Carter, who are former Democrats. When Biden is elected, momentous victory, Carter and Clinton congratulate Biden and Harris, But then we end up having George Bush also. Of course, we already know that he said that he wasn't going to support Trump back in June, but then the former president released a statement extending his congratulations to President-elect Joe Biden, Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, their projected win on Saturday. And in his statement, Bush, 74, revealed that he had called Biden to give him warm congratulations and thank him for his patriotic message delivered in his speech the previous night. And Bush also called Harris to congratulate her on her historic election. Though we have political differences, I know Joe Biden to be a good man who has won his opportunity to lead and unify our country. The statement read, the president-elect reiterated that while he ran as a Democrat, he will govern for all Americans. I offered him the same thing I offered President Trump and Obama, my prayers for his success and my pledge to help in any way that I can. That just seems odd, doesn't it? Well, you have to understand the connection, though, between George Bush, and I haven't done enough investigation as far as to know whether or not Mitt Romney has been involved in these things as well. But you have to really dig deep to know what the connections are. And the connections have a lot to do with what the Chinese are doing on our southern border. They're not just arming the cartels, but the Chinese and the cartels quietly operating in Mexico, aiding U.S. drug crisis. Now, these are older articles. This one's not very old. November the 14th is when this one came out there. But the Chinese are heavily involved in working with drug cartels there. But the Chinese got involved many, many years before, not just what we would see more in recent times. And I'm going to get into that in a little bit here. But as it states right here, Mexico City, from nondescript buildings in the industrial nucleus of Wuhan across wavy seas to dusty tinted super laboratories in the heart of Mexico, and then across the jagged southwest border, dispersing like a wild bomb ripping through every crevice of the United States, the growing presence of Chinese drug lords and cartels below the southern border is one that is killing an unprecedented amount of Americans. According to multiple Mexico-based security and intelligence professionals, the bulk of the deadly work is carried out by the Los Xingwing, identified as having the largest presence in Mexico for trafficking and fentanyl and methamphetamines. As per intelligence findings by security firms, the risk management obtained exclusively by Fox News, the Zings operate through seemingly legitimate shell companies that offer veterinary services, clothing sales, clinical laboratories, and Michoacan, I can't even read that word there, Mexico, okay. Maintenance of computer systems in Mexico. And then it talks about the ports they use and stuff like that, etc. This is no different, guys, than what I had seen firsthand for myself back when I was working with the government as well. And of course, at that time, I thought we were doing the good thing. I thought we were out there dealing with Russians and stuff like that. But what it ended up turning out to be, that it was more like the Iran-Contra affair. And of course, another article here just to show this out here, exposed fascinating alliance between China-Mexican drug cartels. As a result, the former DEA executive says drug dealing kingpins like Chapo Guzman and others reorganized the U.S. success as a golden opportunity to make a killing. So they started bringing in massive quantities of precursor chemicals from China and other countries in Asia. See, originally, back in the 80s, the United States had figured out the CIA knew that they needed massive amounts of funds to be able to fund all the different campaigns, destabilization of nations, things like that had to be done, or at least what they had planned to be doing, which China is doing pretty much the same thing today as what the United States was doing back then. And so in this effort to topple these nations and need this large cash supply, this is when someone in the CIA came up with the brainchild idea to use drugs, traffic them into America, and use the black community to distribute those drugs in America and make a fortune in the process. And of course, millions and millions of dollars as Americans got hooked on cocaine and marijuana and things of that nature there. Marijuana in the early days, like late 70s, early 80s, and then the cocaine became the main drug of distribution. And of course, Bill Clinton allegedly was approached when he was governor of Arkansas to help set this operation up. But there's a big denial, as you'll see here in this little clip here, that so many people are very much aware of. I want to play this for you, so let's listen to this just for a moment, where he is challenged about this.
Sir, the Republicans are trying to blame you for the existence of a small air base at Mena, Arkansas. This base was set up by George Bush and Oliver North and the CIA to help the Iran-Contras, and they brought in plane load after plane load of cocaine there for sale in the United States, and then they took the money and bought weapons and took them back to the Contras, all of which was illegal, as you know, under the Boland Act. But tell me, did they tell you that this had to be in existence because of national security?
Well, let me answer the question. No, they didn't tell me anything about it. They didn't say anything to me about it. The airport in question and all the events in question were the subject of state and federal inquiries. It was primarily a matter for federal jurisdiction. The state really had next to nothing to do with it. The local prosecutor did conduct an investigation based on what was within the jurisdiction of state law. The rest of it was under jurisdiction of the United States attorneys who were appointed successively by previous administrations. We had nothing, zero, to do with it, and everybody who's ever looked into it knows that.
Sir, the Republicans are...
As that was done October 7, 1994, when Bill Clinton was challenged on this. But the thing is, no, Bill Clinton was involved in those, allegedly, I have to say allegedly in this case here, but he was very much involved. But it wasn't just Bill Clinton. There were others as well that were involved. And there were unprecedented number of politicians involved in these crimes against humanity. In fact, is the fact that allowing this huge drug smuggling operation to come into the United States, then targeting the black community to actually be the ones to carry out the crimes that would be done, and then on top of that, causing millions of Americans to become addicted just to be able to suck the money out of livelihoods to fund all these different wars. And I know firsthand some of these stories. This is not, I don't have to have necessarily intel on this, but of course the contacts that I have, we do know a lot of the same situations and things like that. Won't go into that here, but I've spoke about these in private meetings and that I've done, so there's many people that understand what I'm talking about right now that would be listening tonight. But what I've discovered, though, is very, very shocking, and is something that was shared with me. It's not just that the Chinese are arming the cartels on the southern border, but the Chinese got involved with the cartels, funneling money into them back at. I can't say exactly when, but it was back during the times, the 80s, the early 90s, things like that, where the Chinese got involved also with the cartels. And what they did was they exploited, using this money, they exploited these cartels. In exchange, all they wanted was the information, at least at that time, the information of who was involved, what politicians had got involved, because an alarming number of politicians were involved and getting kickbacks as money was being laundered through Florida, through Arkansas, through other states as well. And as you begin to look at all this, the undermining of our nation, to destroy our nation, and then to the Chinese, their interesting way of manipulating the system, and then finding out the politicians that were involved in this, then to turn on those politicians and blackmail them that they would expose them unless they worked together to subvert the United States. Now, I also find it interesting that that little country south of Lebanon, as I was told by one of their secret agents there, don't speak against China. They will be the next world superpower. Also, remember that many companies that are owned by people that are descendants of Abraham, we'll say, moved their companies over to China, broke the back of this nation's industrial revolution, and sent it to China back in the 90s. So it's a much bigger web than you could imagine. But at any rate, lest we forget the title of this article, Chinagate, the most serious scandal in U.S. history. The Chinese fundraising scandal plagued the 1996 Bill Clinton-Al Gore campaign, and Hillary was very much involved. Clinton-Gate, a.k.a. Commerce-Gate, is the most serious scandal in U.S. history. It involves the transfer of America's most sensitive technology, including but not limited to nuclear missile satellite technology, possibly in exchange for millions of dollars and contributions to the 1996 Clinton-Gore re-election effort and Democratic National Committee. See, China has been in our back pocket, and the way they got into the back pocket is because they had all the dirt on the Clintons, on the Bush family, and of course George Bush, George W. Bush, or I call him Senior quite often. Also, not only does he have his, as it states in this article right here from thefreepublic.com, the Bush and China, it's a family thing. This article here goes really into how deep they are involved in China, like Bush Sr. and his brother Prescott. Both lowered their profile in a family business last year, yet the Bush's business suddenly hit headlines again in November. This is a 2004 document, I believe, when documents and testimony from the divorce trial of his president brother Neil showed that he had signed a contract to receive $400,000 a year from Grace Semiconductor Manufacturing, a Chinese company co-founded by a son of former President Xi Jinping, in return for business information and advice. Fair enough, but Neil Bush has no background in technology. His brother's administration, however, is leaning on Beijing to reduce tax discrimination against imported semiconductors. Now, you have to understand, though, why there is such, not just the Clintons, but also the Bush family, why is there such a major tie with China? And although I don't agree with Greg Palast on many issues, in his book, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, he was really close to being onto something that I was very privy to, and that was the smuggling operation that was being done through 3 different power companies, money laundering, and again, I'd have to say alleged was being done, money laundering between Gulf Power, Southern Power, and I think Georgia Pacific was the other one. I may be wrong on that. there was a major investigation going on these companies of what they called illegal campaign contribution. But in my opinion, they were using the subcontractors of these power companies and stuff in order to hide the illegal drug money that was pouring into America, just like the Clintons were dealing allegedly with the Mena, Arkansas case. And of course, Greg Palast was very close to figuring this out. And then who was it that came along and stopped the investigation against the companies, the power companies there? And this was after the death of Jake Horton, who was the CFO of Gulf Power, the mysterious death that he suffered as a result of that in a plane crash, very mysterious plane crash that, well, I'm sure there's people that know a lot about that. But that's when he had to cover this up, because around 1991, there were a lot of people that were dying mysteriously, allegedly in some kind of crime that went bad. And you know, when I shared a lot of this, some of the things publicly that I'm aware of, it was kind of interesting because I had other law enforcement officers coming up to me and telling me that there were issues about hands-off of certain drug runners. You couldn't touch this one or you couldn't touch that one. And that was because of the, as they call it, the Iran-Contra affair. The Iran-Contra affair focused more on getting the drugs in, as it was stated earlier in there, and selling those drugs, taking that money from the people that were hooked on the drugs, and getting their cut from because they really use the black community a lot in the distribution process in this country. And then all these politicians were getting their kickbacks. And of course, those politicians no doubt included some of these big names that we see, but there's a lot of people involved. And the Chinese connection from the Clintons to the Biden Incorporated, it was no different. The French Connection, the iconic 1971 film starring Gene Hackman as grisly New York City detective Popeye Doyle, the bad guy, is wealthy Frenchman operating the world's largest heroin smuggling syndicate. In what could be a sequel, the Chinese government has been operating the world's largest influence peddling syndicate for decades. The drug of choice is no longer heroin, but money, and lots of it. Startling in the mid-1990s, the Clintons, it has grown in both size and audacity and now seems to have ensnared the Biden family as well. There is a straight line from China's meddling in 1996 presidential election directly to Biden Incorporated and their present-day China connection. And today we refer to simply as the 1996 U.S. campaign finance controversy. However, during the Clinton presidency, it was so much more. Both the Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee, the DNC, were directly involved in raising large sums of cash from foreign sources, mostly with ties to Chinese government. The lead actors in the scandal were Johnny Wang, Charlie Tri, Johnny Chung, and James Riotti. And there was also infamous fundraisers in the Buddhist temple in California and the straw donors they used to funnel money to the DNC, all the making of a true crime classic. Now, what's interesting though, where was the money coming from? Because you see, in some of the articles that I already shared with you moments ago, the Chinese, where we got, let's see, we get to it again. The Chinese also got into the drug making, the methamphetamines, Mexico for the product of the methamphetamines and more. And they became the supplier there, giving the cartels all the chemicals to be able to do that. Also flood the United States with these drugs as well. So the money, and of course the laundering schemes we already read about earlier, were massive in what was going on. And then I take a look too at Kamala Harris, her husband's ties to China. Right? DLR Piper, multinational law firm, boasts nearly 30 years of experience in China and over 140 lawyers dedicated to the Chinese investment service branch. Harris links to the company are found with her husband, Douglas Imhoff, who has served as a partner in the firm's intellectual property and technology practice in its media, sport, and entertainment sector since 2017. But you know, I thought to myself, this has to be even deeper though, because I remembered one article on Breitbart. Kamala Harris jailed nearly 2,000 people for marijuana offenses. Now that might sound like, well, she's actually trying to fight the war on drugs. But the black community wasn't very happy with her because she targeted a lot of black people. Now keep in mind, the CIA had been working with black community to be able to do this, but you have to remember, those that don't pay the cut to the politicians, those are the ones that end up in jail. And as I went through looking at this situation with her, I found some startling information about this. Let me find where it's at there. Inside Kamala Harris's polarizing record as a prosecutor. As California's Attorney General from 2011 to 2017, she refused to endorse the 2015 bill calling for a special prosecutor to investigate the deadly police shootings. All right, that was one. But in 2015, Harris required body cameras for California Department of Justice agents, but didn't support legislation mandating them for all police officers. Wonder why? Maybe some of this might answer that. Shortly after taking the job, she sparked a decade-long feud with police unions. Let me back up and read the one that I didn't highlight here. The senator's history as San Francisco's district attorney from 2004 to 2011 also has been scrutinized. Shortly after taking the job, she sparked a decade-long feud with police unions for declining to pursue the death penalty for a gang member who murdered San Francisco's police officer Isaac Espinazo. Why wouldn't she do that? Is it somebody she's trying to protect? One of Harris' worst scandals came in 2010 when a technician was caught skimming cocaine from a crime lab and mishandling evidence. A judge ruled her office failed to disclose that information to defense attorneys, causing more than 600 drug-related cases to get tossed out. Kamala Harris. Was there something that she had to protect? You see, this web of politicians that were involved in this drug smuggling massive undertaking that began back in the 70s, and I was aware of it in the early 80s through the 90s, George Bush covering it up, the Clinton scandal, the Iran-Contra affair, everything that was involved. And of course, we hear George Bush being mentioned as well, as George Bush, when he was CIA director, was involved in that. And it's true. These things did happen. I know this for a fact. But one thing that was shared with me that really bothered me is that as I was in conference over these issues and about President Trump being reelected and put back into office, I was made aware that the Chinese were blackmailing certain politicians that were involved in all these drug crimes and things that were going on back in the 80s and the 90s and also in the early 2000s, etc., that if they didn't help to bring about the destabilization of America, that they would be exposed. And then it makes more sense why somebody like George Bush would actually not only congratulate, but nearly endorse Joe Biden, a man that is the opposite party. But I also remember too, as Greg Palast pointed out, the amount of money he got from those same power companies that his father put a stop to the investigation on that protected some 35 politicians from prosecution, and to keep it from being unraveled of what was really going on between those three states. Just like it was in Mena, Arkansas, just like they had to cover up everything that was allegedly involved with the Clintons. So both Republicans and Democrats are heavily involved. And their connections to China are enormous. And I can only see that when Trump does leave office, and even if he were to leave office now, we are headed to becoming a communist nation. And recently I had a dream that we would end up in major riots in this nation. But what really troubled me, and I don't say that the dream is, it could just be the things that are going on in your mind. So I don't know if it's of the Lord or not. But after I seen the insurrection that took place in this nation, the rioting between the black community and the white community, as a result of what happens in this election, which was really just so sad. And I tried my best in the dream to talk to the black people that were there. And I said to them, you're being used. You have no idea. You're being used. You're only being pawns in a game. Same thing with the Patriots. You're pawns in a game. They're playing you. They're pitting you against one another. They want you to do this because they want to disarm this nation. And then I seen the troops come out. But then what followed the troops were Chinese troops. And these Chinese troops, they laid down on the road. And then another one was like driving a vehicle over the top of them to show that they were like incredibly superhuman capabilities. We will end up as a communistic nation. And it's going to be largely in part two. Because, as I mentioned in my teaching the other day, the evangelical community sold us out. That's part of it as well. Talk about needing to repent. The Christians that have allowed this nation to be sold out for the sake of glorifying that little country south of Lebanon has played a pivotal role in this. And as I mentioned earlier in the broadcast, don't forget, that nation, their intel people have said to me, China is going to be the next world superpower. And I was told that America is done. Need to think about it, friends. We're in a very serious hour. If this broadcast is a blessing to you, would you please consider supporting Israeli News Live? We need your help. In fact, this video right here, Revelation 11, has a profound coming fulfillment. That's the one I did the day before yesterday. I think it would be a blessing to you to hear that side, because if you put this information, that information together, it will definitely bless you. I'm sure of that. Our address, 8297 Champions Gate Boulevard, number 442, Champions Gate, Florida, 33896. Or you can donate online just by clicking the link below there. Please support this broadcast. I know many people are having a hard time right now financially, and we certainly understand that feeling. We see that because, I want you to take care of your own family first. But if God lays it on your heart and you're able to, we certainly need your help to keep the broadcast going. God bless you. Thank you, and good evening.